Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Love Procurement Podcast. My name is Kelly Barner, and I'll be your host for this conversation. Today, I'm glad to welcome Amanda Christian. Amanda is the Senior Vice President of Contracts and Subcontracts at CACI International. Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, Kelly. Great to be with you.
Now, I talked a little bit about where you work now and what you're responsible for, but what else might it be interesting for the audience to know about your background?
Often when you talk to procurement professionals, they often say they stumbled into the position or they have no idea how they made it into procurement. But actually, I went to college for purchasing and production and operations management, which is a lot of words to now say supply chain management. And at the time, I started the courses, really enjoyed it. And my first professor at the gate said, you really have to intern, make sure this is going to be something you like. So I was recruited by a company outside of the DC area in Northern Virginia called SAIC, which stands for Science Applications International Corporation, real mouthful. And I loved it. I loved buying. I loved being a buyer, being involved in everything. And when I went back to school, I said, this is it. I'm going to major in this. And I went on and had a second internship at Lockheed Martin. And when it came time to graduate, I started my career first at SAIC for about 10 years. And then I moved to my current company, which I've been with CACI for 16 years and still loving it and have a great career in it.
Well, you truly are a unicorn. We meet very few people that actually ended up in procurement on purpose with some kind of education. So I think your answer to this next question could be really different from what we often hear. Given that it's a field of your choosing, what is it that you love about procurement?
I love that every day is a new challenge. You never do the same thing twice. And so I'm just a fast-paced individual, love to be in all the action, and that's what procurement brings you. I always say if there's a question anywhere in the business and you have no idea who to call, they always call procurement because we are like the glue that holds everything together.
That's right. We're the solution team, right?
Absolutely.
Now, as we talk about procurement generally, you actually work for a government contractor. So you are subject to or need to meet requirements, abide by standards that private sector companies don't. What are some examples of those additional steps you might need to go through or additional hurdles you might need to clear to meet federal requirements?
So when I think of contracting or procurement, really the job is to negotiate the best contract you can for your company, no matter what, across the board, whether you're selling, whether you're buying, that is your ultimate goal as a professional. So that doesn't change. That's truly the foundation. What changes in the Gov Con space is that we have extra rules and regulations that we kind of have to get through in the process. And the reason why they are there is to try to help make sure that you do have the best negotiation and the best contract in the end, because we are ultimately using taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we are doing the best thing for everyone. But part of that is really those rules and regulations are all built into a process, and it's supposed to be really seamless. And when you're working through it, if you're doing it right, you don't even feel it because you're using the tools and the technology as you go, and they're doing a lot of the checks and balances for you. And it's not something that you have to think about. It's just you're doing a good procurement for your company.
Now, one of the things that I actually think you have in common with a lot of traditional private sector companies, especially at the enterprise level, is that you have very large companies that, for a variety of reasons, are trying to do business with, sign contracts with, or buy from much smaller companies. Now, in some cases, it could be part of a local sourcing initiative, it could be part of supplier diversity, or it could be because they're an innovative startup that's doing something really unique that nobody else is able to do. And you end up with a bit of a mismatch where you have large enterprise systems and requirements and processes and a much smaller potential supply partner trying to meet them. How do you bridge that gap between keeping the standards and requirements in place, but making sure that they don't unnecessarily close the door on or create hardship for the smaller partners you want to work with?
So we are a big proponent of using small businesses. Obviously, that's a requirement of the federal contracting space, but honestly, it's at our core. We try to find innovative companies to work with, and we have a small business liaison officer who that is her full-time job, is going out,
Okay.
meeting with small businesses, identifying potential sources, and pairing them up with our sales team and business development to see how can we work with them in the future. And we track those individuals using our iValua P2P system, our procure to pay system, as potential suppliers. And we ensure that we are soliciting them for proposals, ideas, and really bringing them into the community to make sure that we're bringing a good solution for our customer. And one of the things that I did want to point out was that this year we received the Nunn Perry Award, which is a high distinction from the DoD on mentoring small businesses. And we actually got two, which is
Wow.
not very common within our space. So super excited about that, as that does fall under my purview, and something that we work really hard at is mentoring the small businesses, training them, and making sure that they are in a good space to come into our area and be innovative, because that's what we need.
Well, congratulations for that. Certainly receiving recognition not once, but twice for doing something that a lot of different organizations struggle with is an amazing achievement. And I should also note, you've had a recent addition to your individual responsibilities that all of this is happening against the backdrop of. You've recently taken over responsibility for sell side contracts as well as buy side contracts. How is this a change for CACI in terms of how that process has been managed in the past?
So I started my new role in January of this calendar year. And I had a peer who oversaw all of contracts, and he retired in January. So my management came to me and said, "Hey, would you like to take over contracting in addition to subcontracts?" And they actually moved a portion of my work off my plate, the purchasing and supply chain, and gave that to somebody else. But it really, I've been really enjoying it. It's something new, exciting, and just being able to step back and seeing the whole breadth of the
Mm.
entire contracting cycle has been fantastic. A whole new team of people coming underneath me and really starting to focus them in a little bit different way. Procurement is an area where we used a lot of technology, really leaning forward into we're numbers people. We constantly are trying to figure out how to get to the next best solution, get the next best deal. Contracts, a little bit different of a flavor, more risk adverse, more around negotiations, all about getting a contract in place with our people buying from us. So we're selling that. And so it's been great bringing the two teams together so that we can give a really comprehensive picture to our internal customers and make sure that they're making sound business decisions.
It's definitely a recognition. You know, you and I were talking before about how when people don't know where to go, they often end up at procurement because even if we're not the right answer, we are probably going to know who is. It almost seems like this is a recognition of that same sort of having the information, being a problem solver, but specifically around contracts. What do you think it says about how the rest of CACI sees procurement and those contributions that all contracting activity would be recognized under your scope?
I think that really thinking about it and stepping back, it was we really professionalized the organization. They saw us as individuals that were solution makers, and they could come to them and have really sound business discussions with them to move forward. And we were able to think outside the box in a way that maybe some of the other organizations were not. And so it does make me proud that they saw us that way and expanded our role and brought others to our team. And now we're bringing a lot of the innovative solutions that we had existing within procurement into another department too.
How different are the two different types of contracts? You talked about contracts as well as subcontracts. Is it relatively similar, slightly different process? Is it a different level of terms or service levels that is spelled out? How much sort of reconciliation between managing the two types of contracts has there been?
They're very similar, but just taking a different strategy when you're negotiating them.
Mm,
And the other aspect that's really interesting, that's different because it's the federal contracting space, contracts is not actually typically audited. It's the procurement side that's audited because you're spending the dollars.
yes.
And so that's where a lot of the extra actions have to be taken because we're being audited constantly in that realm. And if we do not pass those audits, we cannot do work in our federal space. So it's very important to always remain compliant. And so a lot of those extra restrictions are put in that department more so than the other. So there's some breathing room on the contract side a little bit, but they definitely have their fair share of, problem sets and things they have to solution, dealing with some really fantastic customers that are sometimes very demanding, and working through those and making sure that we really provide the best technology and expertise we can for them.
Now, you mentioned being audited, and I imagine people listening in are either leaning closer because they're interested, or the hair is all standing up on the back of their neck because they're feeling some anxiety. What is it like going through the audit process?
So for purchasing, they are audited at a minimum every 3 years. And so there is a audit team that comes in from Defense Contracting Management Agency, and they can be either virtual or in person. It's a very intense couple weeks of your life and preparing up to it. But there is a checklist. At least they tell you in advance what they're coming to talk to you about. But they randomly select files, and you have to just kind of work your way through it with
Wow.
them in the team. So it's definitely a lot of sleepless nights and tough times, but we all live through it. And it's, to be honest, it keeps us on our toes. And it also really makes us look at all of our processes very closely and everything that we're working on.
Mm.
And my biggest thing is leaning into technology and trying to figure out how technology can make us more compliant, take less time off of the buyers, and really just focus on getting through the process. Because just because I have a new regulation doesn't mean I get an extra day on my SLA by any
Right.
means. They're saying still the same amount of time, you just have more to do. And so we have used iValue a P2P. We've built in checks and balances throughout the purchasing process. And literally, if you go 3 steps and you haven't done step 2, it will hold you. And it will actually hold you there until step 2 is done before you get to step 3. We've built that in. We've built in API feeds to constantly do checks on and due diligence on our supply base, because that's one of our requirements. And we've also built bots that specifically go through our contracts, look for specific flow downs, and make sure that we're doing it properly. So we're constantly looking what's next, what can we do better, but also what can we take off people's plates, because there's a lot of analysis and other work that has to be done to make it a good contract. And you can't bog them down with all these little tedious things. You got to have them focused.
Now, I'm sure that having the technology helps you and your team be ready, sort of self check, make sure that everyone is using their time the best way. But I also have to think that knowing this technology exists would elevate the expectations on the part of the auditors. Have you seen it happen on that side as well as in terms of how it helps you prepare?
Absolutely. Uh, I think everybody thinks that data is at everyone's fingertips and we can manipulate it and provide it in any type of report needed in a moment.
Magic, right?
Magic. Unfortunately, every time they ask us for something, it's always like, say it's 15 items, we have to find two we're always not in the system that we need, and we have to figure out how we're going to get it. And so there's always that expectation that it's just always readily available. So there's that. And then also, one of the things I'm actually working on right now with Ivalua is what we call a compliance binder. They've actually deployed it for some of their other customers so far that's in the Gov Con space. And what it is it takes all the documents associated with the procurement and it basically puts them in file folders and organizes it at just a touch of a button and
Okay.
puts it in one place for the auditor to go in and review. Right now, that takes about an hour and a half of manual work for us to pull all of it just for one file.
Wow.
We have about 7,000 files a year. So when an auditor comes in, we have to be prepared. Their expectation is that it's available immediately. So we are often trying to get ahead and download things in advance, which takes a lot of extra time. So we're really looking forward to this functionality when we can roll it out this year.
I can imagine if it saves you that much time, and to your point about immediately, I'm sure you don't get a ton of notice that this information needs to be gathered together and ready to present. And so anything that you can do to compress that time down must make an enormous difference. That is definitely one of those areas where it's not even about freeing up human beings to do the human being work. It's about just the time frame that you're working inside of must be incredibly tight.
Yes. I will say, well, many people on my team, especially my compliance team, really look forward to it. And it will help us because often we are told only if auditors are showing up on Monday, we're usually told on Friday night what files they'd like to see on Monday.
Oh, so much for a weekend.
Yeah, so that'll definitely help.
Now, one of the other things that you and I had also talked about in preparation for this conversation is cybersecurity. This is another one of those things that it doesn't matter where you are, what industry you're in, what sector you serve. Cybersecurity is a huge and growing concern for many procurement and supply chain teams. How are you and your team working to meet federal expectations around data and system security?
So cyber is definitely the hottest topic. It has been for years, and I agree. It's across all industries, not just the GovCon space. It's really about protecting your own data, but we not only have to protect our own, we have to protect the government's data, and we have to protect our supply base. And so all of our partners submit information into our systems. We have to make sure it's secured and we have to make sure that they can secure it at the exact same level we can for our customers. And so it does take a lot of coordination. Often the requirements start from the top. And so our customers will dictate at what level we have to be secured because some of the information that we deal with classified, other declassifications and things like that. So we have to make sure that we are doing we're being good stewards of the information. But with that, small businesses often can't make the same amount of
Yeah.
investment into their systems like we can. So we have to have honest conversations with them and say, where are you? And we track that information about them in their supplier profile. And if they can't provide the level of security that we need, they sometimes have to work on our systems or the government system itself to ensure that we don't have any penetration from any bad actors. Really, it's important that we all work together as a team. It's definitely tough, and you're amazed. Every day you see a new article of some type of ransomware or something taking
Yeah.
place, and it's it's nerve-wracking a little because you really don't, you feel like you're in a good spot, you're doing the best you can, and then somehow there's a bad actor that comes along. So we're all, it's a team sport, we're all playing it together.
And that's definitely one of those cases where you don't want to make news headlines for being the
Absolutely.
organization or even having a supplier that was the subject of a breach. It actually goes back to what we were talking about before with it being part of the culture at CACI, not just to seek out these smaller companies, but to partner with them. I have to think cybersecurity is one of the areas where they get the opportunity to learn the most. And whether it means they're temporarily working through your systems or government systems in order to be able to participate in the relationship, it must be a terrific opportunity for them to understand what the expectations are, what they're going to need to do to meet those expectations, and even to have the opportunity to ask you and your team questions about how do we close this gap between where we are and where we need to be.
Absolutely. I think when I reference training, that is one of our biggest trainings that we provide is, and it's not just in groups, it's sometimes one-on-one and mentoring.
Yeah.
How are you going to get there as a company in order to continue to support this work?
Now, Amanda, usually we finish these conversations by asking each guest to share the love, right? We stay on theme with our love branding by really offering up some advice. In your case, I actually have two areas that I would love to ask for some advice in. The first would be around this opportunity that you've had to take on sell side as well as buy side contracts. I imagine that's something that has a lot of people listening in, really thinking about an opportunity to start partnering with other parts of the organization. I know in your case, you were approached because there was a retirement, but given what you've seen about how much similarity there is or how much overlap, is it something where you think procurement should at least reach out internally and learn how that side of the contracting process is working? Is there a benefit, whether you're going to take it over or not, in understanding how other contracts within the organization are managed?
Absolutely. I would urge anyone in any field to always take stretch positions, try something outside of procurement, see if there's other things, because everything is so interconnected that
Yeah.
it's so important that you understand how you impact all the other functional areas in your organization so that you can all work together closely. And interestingly, in this position, I moved, I was reporting to business operations. My counterpart in contracts was actually reporting to legal, and they
Oh,
moved this
interesting.
position under my CFO. And so, three totally different ways of thinking things. I was very much focused on execution in my other position or in my management chain. Legal, very much is risk adverse and
Yeah.
thinking of it in that respect. And then coming under finance, totally different. I love it. I hear all different aspects. I've partnered very closely with my finance counterparts. And I think together we're able to really build a team between subcontracts, contracts, finance, and really impact the company and help the bottom line. And so if you get a chance in any company or situation where you may get to expand your role or
Mm.
learn something new, by all means, always take it. I was always the first person to raise my hand if there was any type of extra assignment, stretch assignment. I will always raise my hand and take it on, even if I have no idea what I'm doing, just so I can learn and just learn something new.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
And the other piece of advice I'd be interested to hear from you is in working with those small suppliers. You know, in some cases, I'm sure it's helping them understand what CACI is looking for or working with a larger organization. I'm sure in other cases, to our earlier exchange, it's about meeting cybersecurity requirements. But Small suppliers have different ways of working, different communication styles. In some cases, they have very different working hours because you could have a startup that's burning the midnight oil on a regular basis. What would be your advice for, even if it doesn't work out to actually contract with or partner with one of these small organizations, what tends to be the tone of your communication with them so that regardless of how the exchange ends, they do at least walk away from the experience having learned something or having grown as an organization?
So I would say there are lots of companies that are trying to always do work with us, and it's hard. I won't say
Mhm.
it's easy by any means. Even with my small business liaison officer, we have an advocate constantly trying to meet new people and pair them up with the right individuals within the company. It's a big organization, so it takes a long time to penetrate and get to the right
Yeah.
person and build those relationships. And so even with if it doesn't work out in one situation, keep trying because you haven't met the right person or your capabilities haven't been seen for what they really truly can bring to the table. And you have to keep expanding and networking to get to the right people within a large organization. It's I always talk to small business owners and they're always it's saying, "Oh, it's so hard to meet the right people." And it
Yeah.
is. I honestly, the the amount of work they have to do is 10 times harder because they don't have as many people. Often it's just the owner themselves is out doing the marketing,
Yep.
trying to get their foot in the door with other companies and building their business. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And so what I'd say is keep trying and get to the right people. And if it doesn't work out the first time, maybe it'll happen the second or third time.
But don't give up.
Don't give up.
Awesome. Well, Amanda, this has been an incredibly interesting conversation. We've gotten to talk about some really different things that we don't always get to bring up in procurement conversations. If someone is meeting you by listening to or watching this conversation, what would be the best way for them to reach out and connect with you?
LinkedIn. I always try to respond to everyone who sends me a message. I am listed under Amanda His Song Christian.
Excellent. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for spending your time with us today.